Great, welcome back from a break, and I hope you had some nice cookies and some coffee and you're high on caffeine and ready to do some more science. Great, now we have a presentation from the Nanotech and Medicine group, and take the floor. You can start whenever you're ready.
Well, welcome everyone to our presentation about the nanotech and medicine field of this Congress. We're really honored to present our presentation about nanotech and medicine. And I'd like to start off with a little question. There's 3 statements on the board, and I'm going to ask you which one's true, so I'll just go through them all. Statement A, your nails grow at a rate of 1 nanometer per second. Statement B, human hair is approximately 80,000 to 100,000 nanometers in width. Statement C, a sheet of paper is about 100,000 nanometers thick. So please raise your hand if you think statement A is true. Please raise your hand if you think statement B is true. Please raise your hand if you think statement C is true. Well, I saw some people raising their hand 3 times, and they were in fact right, because in fact all of these statements is true. So that's how small a nanometer is. Today we're going to discuss, firstly I'm going to discuss the nanoscience and nanotechnology in general and the difference between the 2 fields. Then Eva is going to discuss the medical usage of nanotechnology, which is our subject, and Javier is going to present problems, risks, and most importantly, benefits involved with this field. So now, what exactly is nano, and what's nanoscience, or what's nanoscale? Well, first of all, 1 nanometer is 10 to the minus 9 meters, and the nanoscale describes things at a scale of 1 to 100 nanometers, so at the molecular level. And I'm going to explain to you the difference between nanoscience and nanotechnology, because the fields can seem similar, but there are some slight differences. First of all, nanoscience is the study of manipulation and engineering of particles on a nanoscale to make these particles useful and to use them in a way. Nanotechnology describes the application of nanoscience, so it's about creating these new particles that can be useful. And they can be useful in lots of ways, as we'll see further on in the presentation. Firstly, I'm going to talk to you a bit about the history of nanotechnology. Because nanotechnology is a fairly new concept, but we've used it for ages without realizing it. For instance, there's these beautiful windows in medieval churches, and they actually use nanotechnology. In stained glass, people discovered if you add gold chloride, it will give a red tint, and if you add silver, you will see yellow tint in stained glass. And this is actually manipulating compositions on a nanoscale, and therefore it is in fact nanoengineering. So the real idea of nanoscience started in 1959 with the lecture of Richard Feynman. His lecture was called "There's Plenty of Room in the Bottom," and he described this new field in which you can manipulate certain objects at a really small scale to make useful products that can be used in various different ways. And nowadays we view it as the first actual lecture in nanoscience. So that's Richard Feynman. And the field of nanotechnology was actually started in 1974, so a couple of decades later, by this guy called Norio Taniguchi. And from that point on, interest really started going up exponentially. People started getting more and more interested in this field of nanotechnology because there are so much options. But still, it was only all theoretical. We couldn't actually make these nanoparticles in such a way that it was really useful. And we couldn't view these nanoparticles because they're on such a small scale that even light just doesn't behave the way we're used to. But a breakthrough came when the scanning tunneling microscope, which is that ginormous thing, was actually invented in 1981. And with that you can image individual atoms. And suddenly there was a whole range of options available. We could view particles, and therefore we could start imaging them and manipulating them, which made nanotechnology actually possible. And then interest raised even more. The USA were the first investors in nanotechnology, but soon other countries followed. So nanoscience and nanotechnology started in physics, but it's really a multidisciplinary field between chemistry, biology, and physics. It combines all aspects of our modern day science, and therefore it's really interesting. So let's talk a bit about what's actually the goal of using nanotechnology and why is it so useful. So first you need to understand what actually nanomaterials are. Nanomaterials are these objects on a really small scale, and they can have various properties. We usually divide them into groups using 3 parameters, namely their size, their composition, and their chemical surface, as that's where the chemical reactions happen. You can see illustrated the 2 approaches for producing nanoparticles. The first is top-down, which uses a bulk of chemicals, dividing them into smaller and smaller pieces until they're nanomaterials. And this is useful because you can see for the same volume that the nanoparticles have a way bigger surface, so they can make a lot more chemical reactions, with, which is what the material is actually used for. And that's why they can be more efficient at their job. The other approach is the bottom-up approach, at which you have individual atoms, which you cluster into bigger groups, and then you can manipulate them into nanomaterials. And now Eva will tell you a bit about the medical applications of these particles.
Exactly. So now that you know a little bit about nanoparticles, I want to talk about their use in the medical field, where they are currently emerging as a technology that could potentially revolutionize medicine. And first of all, they can actually be used to prevent certain diseases, so for example through vaccines. And what is the thing with vaccines is that usually there's an injection of bacteria or viruses without their infectious properties, so the body can prepare itself for an immune response the next time they see the virus. But the problem with this is that it's not always efficient, because sometimes the particles in the vaccine get taken out before the body can really prepare itself. And the answer to this problem could be nanovaccines, in which the viruses or the antigens of certain diseases are encapsulated in nanoparticles by many layers of lipids. And this would mean that the vaccines could technically live longer and thus be more efficient, which studies on mice have actually shown is possible. And one example of this would be the HIV vaccine that's currently in development. And what happens is that the dose frequency of this vaccine can be lowered with a nanovaccine. So there have been some studies where a single dose administration of this nanovaccine lasts about 3 months in dogs and 3 weeks in mice. And normally, a single dosage only lasts 38 hours. So as you can see, there's quite a decrease in the frequency of dose administration, which would be really, really useful. But not only can nanoparticles be used to prevent diseases, we can also, we can also use them to. Okay, does this still work?
Yes.
No. Sorry.
Technical problems.
Yeah.
Nadia. Entonces, si quieres que este vídeo lo mando.
I think this was okay, so apparently I wrote this one. I'm very sorry. But to get back to nanoparticles, what we can do is to use them to detect and diagnose certain diseases. And nanotechnology will allow us to detect these diseases earlier and better than we are doing it now. And what not many people know is that we are actually already doing it by using nanoparticles on pregnancy tests, for example. And using nanoparticles to detect diseases has certain advantages because, for one, it allows rapid testing, meaning that maybe we can detect and diagnose diseases in one visit to the doctor, and in the same visit also start the treatment, which early treatment means that there's less damage to the patient. But this works because the nanotechnology provides new contrast agents and materials so we can get an early and more accurate diagnosis, and it's actually expected to allow a diagnosis at the cellular and even subcellular level because of its advanced imaging and high-performance technology. And one example of this would be nanoflares that are currently in development, and they're being used to detect cancer cells in the bloodstream. And this is usually quite difficult because they're only present in a very, very small amount, so the normal technology can't detect them. But with the nanoflares that work by binding to the targets of the cancer cells and then generating light if they're attached to the target, we can actually detect these cells definitely more easily and more accurate than we can do now. And still, there are even more options to use nanotechnology in medicine. So we can actually treat diseases with them as well. And there are many, many different possibilities. So, for example, nanoparticles can absorb and remove toxins, deliver drugs, destroy the genes of cancer cells so they can't grow, help with immunotherapy, and even guide the way for surgery. And these possibilities and more are possible because, as you've learned before, nanoparticles have different properties due to the different parameters that we can use. But the most common one that's in development right now is using it to deliver some drugs. And the nanoparticles can either be the drug themselves or just carry the drug. And the objective of this is to make sure that more of the drug gets to its target, so it's more efficient, and to also reduce the harmful effect of the drug on the healthy cells that shouldn't be damaged, which would be very, very good if we could do that. And furthermore, we can also combine using nanoparticles and traditional treatment to create a more efficient and a better treatment than what we have now. And an example of this would be the treatment of diabetes by using nanoparticles that sort of work like a sponge to carry insulin. And when the glucose level in the blood rises, the nanoparticles release the insulin, and then when it drops again, the release stops. And in some studies they have done, it has shown that a dose of this can last up to 10 days, whereas with the normal injections we have now, patients have to inject themselves multiple times a day. However, this technique is still in development, as most of the usages of nanoparticles in medicine are. So currently there's quite a lot of research going on with using nanotechnology in medicine. So around 800 clinical trials are being done at the moment. And many of them could possibly allow us to maybe cure cancer and make sure that HIV isn't such a big problem anymore, and even more. But we also use nanoparticles already for some other things. So for example, for cosmetics and for sunscreen, which most of you probably don't know because the big companies don't really want the consumer to know because they are afraid that nano is seen as something negative. So if they don't tell the consumers don't stop buying their products. And using nanotechnology has some possible applications that are currently just being imagined. But for example, we could maybe one day use nanoparticles to monitor a patient's health at home, and then there would be a message at the hospital if something really bad is happening. Or we could maybe use nanotechnological implants, and much, much more. Pretty much the thing is that if you can imagine it, maybe one day we will actually be able to do it.
have already talked about the concept of nanotechnology and the technical usage in medicine. However, we have to take also into account the different implications and consequences that we're going to have when introducing nanotechnology in our actual world. So I would like to begin talking about different problems and risks that we need to take when starting introducing nanomedicine in our society. Firstly, and it sounds paradoxically, but we are going to find different health issues. In fact, we are conscious that we can't make perfect medicine. And we already have a discipline called nanotoxicology, which is in charge mainly of investigating and studying the different effects that nanoparticles have in our human bodies. A very common disease or problem that we can find in nanomedicine is the bioaccumulation. The accumulation consists in the accumulation of different nanoparticles which are non-degradable, such as platinum, silver, or gold nanoparticles, in different parts of our body that can produce different levels of toxicity in long terms. However, health is not the only problem, and we can find different social problems. The main social problem is that nanodrugs are actually a very expensive product for the consumers. And in fact, nanoparticles are actually non-affordable for most of the population. Here, you can see a graph where you can see three different drugs. First one, Lipitor, is a non-nano drug, while Tricor and Triglyce are are nanodrugs, in fact.
Otherwise, just use the other speaker.
I think I don't need even the microphone, so. As I was saying, here we can find three different drugs.
Please turn the microphone off, because otherwise it'll just have fun with itself.
Great. So, sorry for the technical issues, but I'm going to continue. We can see in this graph the different costs and the different prices that have the non-nano drug Lipitor against the other two nano drugs. These are drugs that try to cure a disease called hypercholesteremia, that is like an increase in the level of cholesterol in blood. And it's an actual problem that these nano drugs are not accessible for us. And this can produce different social and medical disequalities in our actual society. However, we need to know that this has been always a problem in the pharmaceutical industry. For the investigation and the research of these drugs, companies needed to incur a high amount of money in regulations, controls, and patents. Therefore, in some years, this problem of cost would be much less, because in fact nanodrugs are nano-sized and therefore are very cheap to produce. Finally, I want to touch the topic of environment, which is something that we are really scared about in these moments of advancing technologies. And nanomedicine is not doesn't affect really our environment. Nanotechnology is very small applied to nanomedicine because it's a small scale production. We don't need high amounts of nanodrugs to cure our diseases. Therefore, there not will be an impact in other living things. So environment is not a real problem. There exist negative things, but obviously benefits of nanotechnology are much higher. Fine-tuning the different nanoparticles allows us to achieve whatever function we want to give to a nanoparticle. Nanotechnology, as Eva said, has infinite possibilities and limitless functions. And moreover, nanodrugs increase obviously efficiency through drug delivery target processes, for example. And even though it may exist toxicity, it's going to reduce it highly from conventional therapies such as chemotherapy. We also need to consider that nanotechnology is not only present in medicine, and in fact, it would have a very big impact in other fields, such as construction, but also in a very important one that is ecology. And we just wanted to mention that through different nanoparticles that catalyze particles, we are able to purify water or even reduce contamination in air. As a group, we also wanted to show our solutions against these several problems that nanotechnology has. And first of all, we want to secure safety in our citizens and ensure that nanoparticles introduced in medicine will be really positive for us, and we should evade all sorts of health issues or problems. For that, we're sure that we need to have exhaustive regulations by the main authorities. But not only we need to ensure regulation and safety, but we need to educate our younger generations about the importance of these new technologies. Humanity has always had fear against unknown, and we always try to evade innovation. However, we need to accept innovation as an essential part of our society and culture. And we need to accept that new technologies, such as nanotechnology, will be present in the following decades for our daily life. To sum up, nanotechnology through nanotherapy, nanodiagnosis, and prevention would solve the problems of modern medicine. As Hein said, once Richard Feynman told that there's plenty of room in the bottom, and it's true. Nanomedicine has many secrets. Even though it's very difficult for us to imagine the nano world, or even understand the nanoscale, and know how it actually works, we need to keep with the challenge and accept it in order to discover the greatness of the smallest things.